The newest character is finally out, and she's both moody and powerful. Vex is... oh gosh, hold on. Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, that's not her? On screen. Oh, fuck. The newest character is finally out, and she's both moody and powerful. Vex is our newest Yordle caster that's supposed to be a counter to movement-based champions. Since she hasn't been out long, her low win rate is more than likely mostly due to people still getting used to her as a champion. She definitely feels somewhat underwhelming, and a few weeks ago I put out a poll asking you where you think she would thrive most. The majority voted for her intended lane, mid, but the second highest was support, so I wanted to go out and see how players in high-elo are using her in that role. Normally, we focus on one player, but since Vex is still pretty new, we don't have one player who is one-tricking Vex support yet. So instead, I have analyzed dozens of players to bring you a consensus on the best way to play her as support. Here's a list of everyone we've analyzed who are all master tier or above in their respective regions and have played Vex support in solo queue games with success. After watching so many Vex support games, I have some pretty strong feelings on her as support that we'll revisit at the end of the video, so stick around until then. As Vex says, every silver lining has a dark cloud, so let's talk about her weaknesses first. First of all, like many caster supports, Vex is squishy and immobile, and on top of this, the range of her abilities is relatively short, making her easy to kill. Her passive, which can reset more quickly by proccing gloom stacks, takes longer to charge since you won't be farming minions as support. Like our recent Zoe support video, she requires an early lead to really be effective and have an impact for the team. And finally, and most importantly, you can easily counter Vex by just going into your game options and turning shadows off. But even with all of these potential problems, our players have found a way to make it work. Before we start talking about her abilities in laning phase, let's first talk about Vex's passive because it's so imperative to her kit. Doom and Gloom, as it's named, charges over time until you see the bar under Vex's health is full and turns red. This means that her next basic ability, any ability but her ultimate, will fear the target from anywhere between 0.75 to 1.5 seconds depending on her level. Since all of Vex's basic abilities are AoE, you can fear multiple targets, making it pretty powerful. Its only downside is its long cooldown of 22 seconds at level 1. To reduce this cooldown further, you can proc gloom stacks on enemies. Enemies accrue gloom stacks on them if they use some sort of dash or blink, even the flash summoner spell, or if she hits her E ability, which also applies gloom on them. Vex can then use her Q or W or auto attack to trigger the gloom stack, which does more damage to the target and charges her passive bar 25% against champions and 10% against monsters or minions. This is Vex's first downfall as a support. With a mid lane Vex, you can apply multiple gloom stacks to minions and the enemy laner with your E, and triggering them all can mean an instant reset of your passive and 2 quick fears. As support Vex, you don't want to be farming minions at all so your ADC can receive more gold, meaning that at most you can reduce this cooldown by 50% if you hit both enemy champions as compared to 85 or 100% if you were to hit 6 minions and 1 champion in the mid lane. I also want to make a quick note here that against engage heavy supports as Vex, it beseeches you to hold on to your fears when their engage abilities are off cooldown. She can function well at peeling enemies off her carry with her fear, so while you may want to be poking whenever possible, play the lane slower and save your fear for when the enemy inevitably goes in. And her passive is why at level 1 you should be leveling up Vex's E or Looming Darkness. Looming Darkness is a circular AoE ability that has a short delay, does damage, slows enemies hit, and also, like we just discussed earlier, applies a stack of gloom to those enemies. The damage from hitting your E at level 1 and auto attacking to proc your gloom stack supersedes the damage you do with any other ability and also can allow you to refresh your fear passive quicker. Through all of the players I analyzed, only saw 1 or 2 level up E first instead of her Q ability, which is a mistake. Trust me, I normally try to learn as much as possible when reviewing high-elo players, but I'm here to tell you this time the majority of them are even doing it wrong. Again, this is the only ability that applies gloom stacks to enemies, so you should typically lead with this ability and try your best to hit it since it will mean doing your max damage. At level 2, you should be grabbing Vex's Q or Mistral Bolt. It's a line skill shot that starts off big and slow and then after some travel time increases in speed and becomes skinnier. It's pretty long range, but since it gets smaller towards the end, the missile can be tricky to hit. This ability in lane turns you into a kind of poke support, and since it's your longest range ability, its cooldown reduces with levels and has the best damage scaling in your whole kit, you should be maxing this first. All of our players use this ability to whittle down the enemy laners like you would with any poke support. This also unlocks the combo you'll be using the most as Vex. First, you should hit your E on an opponent, slowing them down and potentially fearing them if your passive is charged, and applying gloom to them. Then, as they're CC'd, you should have a much easier time lining up your Q to do both more damage and proc your gloom stack. The combination can do some pretty decent damage, so be looking to use this throughout the game whenever possible. At level 3, all of our players grab their W or personal space. It's a simple ability that does pretty much instant AoE damage around Vex and gives her a shield regardless if she hits an enemy or not. You can try to work this into early lane combos, but since you're a caster, in laning phase you're going to be using this mostly for damage reduction for yourself. Just like Mistral Bolt, this ability can proc gloom stacks, and since its AoE around you is again almost instant, it can be a very effective way to surprise multiple enemies with a fear. This quick way of proccing fear becomes even stronger when Vex finally hits level 6 and all of our players level up her ultimate or Shadow Surge. The first half of the ability is a line skill shot that can only hit champions, has a decently long range, and is also pretty quick. Once you hit an enemy with it, you can then reactivate the ability to travel to them and do even more damage. The most fun way to use this is to hit an unsuspecting enemy from long range when your passive is up, traveling to them, and quickly fearing them with your W. This is possible because your ultimate is your only ability that will not trigger fear or consume gloom stacks on enemies. Using this ability aggressively like this turns you into a kind of all-in CC champion, like a much less tanky Leona with more range. If the enemy you hit with your ultimate dies within 6 seconds of being hit by it, you can recast it again for free. So it goes without saying that you can turn into an amazing cleanup champion if the kills line up properly. This ultimate also gives our Vex players some ability to roam, casting the ability from long range over a wall or out of vision to surprise an enemy laner when you zoop in and help finish the kill. Most of the time though, you'll be using this ability to help pump out more damage in the middle of a fight in hopes of getting more resets. The scariest part of this is that you can completely whiff the first skill shot, and if that happens, that means no ultimate for you at all. So it is imperative that you hit that first half. We talked about Vex's basic early game combo, but I also want to talk some more about useful ones when your ultimate is up. If you're out of range of your other abilities, you can first hit your ultimate skill shot doing more damage, then travel to the enemy with the second half of your ultimate. Upon arrival, use W to immediately apply a fear to everyone around you. While they're feared, cast your E to do more damage and apply gloom, and then finally finish off with your Q to proc the gloom stack and burst them down even more. You don't always need to lead with your ultimate though. If someone's close enough, you can first perform your basic combo by landing your E, once again slowing them and applying gloom. Follow up with your Q or W depending on how close you are to the enemy. Use either your Q or W, whichever one you just didn't use previously, and then finish off with a close range ultimate to hopefully burst down the rest of the enemy's life bar and get your ultimate reset started. In the mid game, our players like to both roam around the map with their ultimates to catch unsuspecting victims and just generally stay around other carries. Vex is not a champion, even when decently ahead, that can burst down enemies on her own. There's power in numbers with this one, so even though she'd probably want to stay in her room all alone all day, it's better to stick with a buddy so you can burst them down together. In teamfights, you have 3 objectives. Number 1 is to fear multiple enemies and whittle them down with your Q. Max level, your Q has a 5-second CD, and again is AoE, so using it alone or with the basic combo we talked about earlier can junk down the enemy team if they're unable to engage. If you have a solid engaged champion on your team that can get the team fight going, many of our players instead hold their fear for when that person gets the team fight going with CC. Vex is very good at stacking CC with her teammates, and if someone like a Malphite gets a big AoE ult, your AoE fears on top of that can mean disaster for the enemies. Finally, of course, you can also be the engage yourself. Be careful with this unless you're pretty far ahead or have a stopwatch in your inventory, but with your long range ultimate and AoE fear on your W, you can be the Malphite on your team. Just make sure if this is what you're going to attempt to do, your team isn't too far away and can support you as you go in. Some quick Vex tips and tricks. First off, the fear status typically makes enemies walk away from wherever your champion is standing, but one exception to the rule is when you fear someone with Vex's E. Where they would typically walk away from Vex, they'll instead walk away from the center of the ability. Use this knowledge to push enemies towards your team and making your basic combo easier to land. If you find yourself with an ultimate reset and no one to throw it on, don't let it go to waste. The projectile your ultimate shoots out also gives sight, so if that reset is about to expire, just shoot in a direction that you assume an enemy may be hiding, or that will give you and your team more information of where they could be. And finally, kind of like we talked about with Ahri's Q in that video, Vex's Q makes a different sound when it hits enemies. This means that you can check bushes safely with her Q if you listen carefully to the sound it makes. For their build, everyone starts the game with a Spell Thief's Edge. Typically, they then start to rush their mythic items, skipping true support items for Ludens against squishier teams, Leandries against tankier teams, or Everfrost if you prefer to have more utility in your kit. Along the way, they're building their boots, with 80% of the players we analyze taking Sorc shoes for more damage, and a smaller 20% taking boots of Lucidity for ability haste. Next, many people do, and I would highly suggest, building a Zhonya's. You could also work towards a Morellonomicon if the enemy team has solid healing, or build a Horizon Focus for more burst damage if you're ahead. Other items that can work well with Vex also include Cosmic Drive, Death Cap, or maybe even a Void Staff. If the game goes late or they need some more oomph in their builds, they're building an Elixir of Sorcery, and throughout the whole game, as a good support does, they're buying control wards and maybe even a Wardstone if the game goes very late. For their runes, there are multiple pages that people are trying, but the following has seen the best results. First, take Comet for more damage, Mana Flow Band for more mana regen, Transcendence for ability haste, and Scorch for even more damage. They also bring Cosmic Insight for additional AH on their summoner spells and items, and Perfect Timing for a free stopwatch. For Flex runes, take 2 Adaptive Force and either Armor or Magic Resist depending on your lane opponent. Vex support works well with longer range ADCs like Ezreal or Caitlyn, or ADCs with CC like Jhin or Jinx. Vex support struggles against hook supports like Thresh or Nautilus, or tanky engage supports like Maokai or Rel. I'm gonna be real with you all, I think Vex has the potential to be a solid champion, but needs a little love in the buff department to get there. As a support, she struggles with how squishy and immobile she is, so until she gets a few buffs, I'd practice her in normals before bringing her into your ranked games. If you guys want to see me try Vex support live, I stream every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. If you want more off-meta support videos, I just did a video on the best Zoe support in the world last week. And also, if you'd like to make suggestions or talk to more like-minded off-meta support players, we have a Discord that you can join in the description below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.